Hey everyone, welcome to the That's Allowed podcast. I'm your hostess, Adrienne McKeon, and today we have Asia Love. Welcome, Asia. Please introduce yourself to the audience.
Thank you so much. So I'm Asia Love. I'm the founder of multidimensionalu.com. What is that? It's a metaphysical coaching company and really the hub for the build out of a new earth based in higher dimensional coordinates. And what the heck does that mean? That just means that we actually get to feel good the majority of the time. And when we're in that space, we get to create a completely different version of reality. One that's much more magical and synchronistic and easy, where the law of action doesn't require us to be working so hard. Joy is our birthright, and life just gets magical.
I love it. I love everything you just said. Okay, so I'll just throw out the first question and we'll see where this takes us. So what story is the world not getting?
So, of course, you would expect someone in my profession to be in real-time conversation with the greater unified field, and then even more specifically, the people that will end up listening to this particular conversation. And so what came right before I got on is the need to talk about energetic sovereignty for empaths. The idea that we can't really have boundaries, right? We talk a lot about boundaries in mainstream now. This gets much easier when we have bioenergetic sovereignty. Much more difficult, much more of a slog when we don't.
Can you say more about that?
So again, I like to say, what the heck does that mean? Translation, please. Because most of us didn't get an education like we did in primary school. Like think of the primary colors. We all learned some basic alphabet and numbers, but unless you were a lucky kid, you really got no education around your psychic hygiene. Energy centers in the body, the beautiful metaphysical infrastructure that is part of the unseen part of this physical bioform. So I'll break it down into an example, right? We walk into a room and all of a sudden we don't feel good. Something is off, someone in the room is off, something maybe even you can feel it coming your way. And the training most of us got was to ignore that because we can't necessarily name it or identify it. Act as if nothing's going on and try to just make the best of it. The antithesis to that would be to recognize we've got some really heavy energy in this room. Some of it feels like, yes, it's psychic attack energy coming my way, directed my way, intentionally or unintentionally. I'm going to recuse myself from the room. I'm going to go do whatever I need to do in my field. And obviously that's a lot of what I would call chakra clearing and grounding and making sure that you get your field expanded and up into really, really high vibrational state so that when you re-enter the room, that same energy coming towards you becomes transmuted in your field and you are no longer feeling like you're getting hit left, right, and center and buffeted around. This is why many empaths don't want to go to large gatherings of people, because there's so much of this type of, astral pollution flying around. But most of us, we can feel it, we know it, but we haven't been given the language, the vocabulary, and the tools on how to navigate that. And of course, the human population is kind of really in the thick of things now. So what seemed like kind of a luxury before, I think, is absolutely critical to your own mental health and well-being going forward. So I get really excited to explain to people something that if I had known it decades ago, it would have saved me a lot of dealing with misunderstood anxiety that is very then easily put on you. It's your problem. You're sensitive. You have anxiety. You have these issues. No, it's the reverse, right? We just have this super spidey sense of being able to pick up on all of it. And I would say the other thing is everyone is an empath. To a certain degree, it depends on how much they have had to shut down their emotional body in their lifetime. And we know there are a lot of people that had to shut it way down and shut the heart center off. And that's always the first step, is starting to open all of that back up. So I don't want to make it sound like an us and them. Everyone is an empath. Everyone is. It's just that some people are actively working on personal growth and other people aren't. And this creates a huge divide in families, in communities. And it's the difference between, taking responsibility for everything that's happening in your field and not being a victim versus projection, blame, and being, the ultimate Olympian victim. Fundamentally, nothing wrong with any of that. We're not going to judge it. But a lot of people are very, very unhappy and they don't know why. And so a large part of what I like to talk about in giving these examples from my own life and stories is there is a better way. You can live so much more freely and joyfully and happily when you reclaim this level of energetic sovereignty for yourself. And the good news is that then you step out of enablement and enabling kind of this old way of being in the world, and you show something completely different, just not even having to talk about it, but just with your example of how you show up energetically.
Everything you're saying is so wonderful, and I have so much to say about it. Okay, so let me start with, I think one of the things that happens, at least for me, I know, is that you may not even be aware. You walk into a room, right? And you just have this feeling, and you don't know where that feeling's coming from. You don't know that it's someone sending it your way or that it's in the room even. You might think, oh, maybe I'm just upset about something. And then you start asking yourself, well, what am I upset about? And of course, you can find all kinds of things to be upset about when you look for it. And so then you get yourself into this loop that maybe has nothing to do with you and was just something you picked up in your space, but that now you're ruminating on and trying to figure out and perhaps creating a problem that wasn't even there.
Right. Yeah, it's like the fundamental step is to check in on ownership. Is this
Yeah.
mine? And intuitively, you will be able to feel the difference,
Mm-hmm.
right? Especially the more you keep your field clear, right? I really talk a lot about basic psychic hygiene. We don't walk in our homes with muddy boots. We take them off at the door, we clean them. It's the same thing. Like, we're out in the world. We've got to come in. I used to talk to my, daughter about this. She's 14. When you come in the house, we got to make sure that you're not bringing in all sorts of other stuff from the outside world, right? And it can happen so fast. To your point, all of a sudden the feeling is just there. So yeah, checking in on ownership. Is that even mine?
Yeah.
And usually the answer is no.
No. This happened to me the other night. So I've been avoiding the news for obvious, reasons, but my mom had the news on the other night. And so I saw this kind of just peripherally. I wasn't even really paying attention to it. And all of a sudden it was like I just started crying. And I couldn't stop. And I was like sobbing at the table and everybody was like, "What's wrong with you?" I'm like, "I don't think this is mine. I just like just everyone's really upset right now and it's just a lot. I'm just processing a lot right now." And she's like, "Do you want me to turn that off?" I'm like, "Yeah." Could you?
Absolutely. And the spontaneous processing that you're talking about with the people I work with, they're working as metaphysicians in their own right.
Mhm.
And we're all experiencing that a lot right now
Yeah.
because of what I said earlier. When your heart is shut down, you can't process your own emotions, but they're still moving and out in the field, right? I like to say the biggest form of pollution on the planet is lower negative thought form and feelings.
Yes.
And so guess what? Those of us with an open heart portal will be able to clear this and feel it and emote it on behalf of the collective. So I'm glad you brought that up because that's not something, again, we were taught and trained on how to deal with that and even to recognize it, right?
Yeah. So it sounds like you were not taught this stuff growing up, just as I was not. When and how did you discover that this was something that you were able to do and start to hone that as a tool?
Yeah. So I wrote this little book called How Mommy Got Her Magic Back. And it was based on a conversation I had with my daughter when she was then 5 years old. And I was trying to put into 5-year-old terms what I was experiencing. And the best way I knew how to phrase it was, I got my magic back, right? This thing we were talking earlier about being able to live in such a different way, multidimensionally, without all of the constraints of linear belief systems,
Mhm.
impinging what we think we can create here and how we can live. So there were, looking back, there were were elements of it for sure. But my awakening, I would say, to this larger reality in consciously happened in 2009 when my father became gravely ill with cancer. He didn't have a terminal diagnosis. He was in the midst of chemo treatment. And then all of a sudden, I just received a transmission, like a download, like a knowing. And I just knew he would be leaving. He will not be staying, is kind of what it said. And so I shifted gears. Everyone else was like, oh, he's going to beat cancer again. He had had it 40 years before. And I was able to be very, very present during that time, even leading up to, he was in the ICU for about 4 days. He had an underlying heart condition nobody knew about from that original experimental radiation treatment for his original cancer 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was able to just go into this mode of helping midwife him out of his body. I look back and set the stage, made all the calls, said the things he needed to hear. And now with the knowledge I have now is I actually helped create an energetic bridge for him to be able to do that. It's kind of like when we go to leave a place, anyone with young children knows this well, right? You're going out for an evening out and the young child does not want you to leave. This is what it feels like to our loved ones when they're trying to transition and they don't want to let us down and they don't want to leave. So they do their best to stay, right? So that all happened. It wasn't conscious on my part. It was very spontaneous. His childhood friend who had passed away a couple hours before, I could actually perceive him in the room. I knew he was there. Wow. I knew he had come for my father. And then when my father actually left his body, I saw my entire lifetime of memories with him in review. Never heard anybody talk about that, right? When you have your own near-death experience, maybe, but just an amazing gift, an amazing energy went through me. And then, you can imagine I was pretty overwhelmed by the whole experience. I went home. I had a young child. My daughter was very little at that time. And I tried to just kind of move through the grief, the deep, deep grief that I was in because, he was only 65. He had just retired 3 years before. He was kind of really excited to spend this next chapter. And, it was like the rug got pulled out. So on a human level, it was very disorienting, but he kept showing up. He kept showing up when I was driving places. He would talk to me. And I remember thinking like, well, I must just be creating this because I miss my father. And then make a long story short, I helped another soul, another person cross over. It was the daughter of a friend, and she did the same thing. She kept showing up. And that's when I started realizing, okay, wait a minute, and I'd done this for my aunt 20 years before. There's a trend here, there's a pattern. And I ended up working as a spirit medium for a while. And then it kind of evolved from there. But that was the major catalyst event. And when I talk to other people, their awakenings usually are something fairly disruptive. The death of someone close to them. It could even just be the loss of a job, something that's just very disruptive. And it's kind of like, it's time for you to remember a greater reality and step into kind of a teaching, way showing role, right? Your life is your example, and there's something much greater here. So what I think I've seen a proliferation of spirit mediumship in the last 20 years for sure. This is becoming more mainstream. And then it just kind of goes on from there. There are many different dimensions. There's a whole beautiful multiverse out here, right?
Absolutely. So I hear this all the time from people on my show when they're talking about traumatic events. And then they discover this superpower and they sort of think, oh, well, so this trauma gave me the superpower. No, you always had that superpower. It's just that trauma was the thing that made you realize that it was there and that you could use it.
Absolutely. It really kind of kicks open the permeability of your awareness, and you move out of the density and distortion and kind of the lane that you were taught you need to be in. When we were children, this was natural. Babies have an amazing ability to connect with multiple dimensions until we are schooled that you need to be here and this is reality and this is what is real, and stop daydreaming. And those aren't, I look back on the pretend friends I had. They weren't pretend.
Right?
Yeah. So it's kind of like, and I would say that a lot of, I talk a fair amount about star kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
The idea that we have a lot of very old souls in young human form on the planet right now. They won't be doing that. They won't be forgetting everything, going underground, and then having to go through what I jokingly call adult-onset awakening. productive. If you don't have to go to sleep in the first place, and don't do it. Like, just stay awake. So I think
I might have to use that as the title. Adult onset awakening. I love it. I love it. Go on.
yeah. So there's a whole group of younger folks on the planet who will be doing this very differently, especially if we give them permission to do that. And a lot of that is unpacking all of our, what I would call confinement. You can call it trauma. Absolutely, trauma is part of it, but it's really about, you need to fit into these constructs. You need to blah, blah, blah. That's too much. This is too little, all that stuff, and let it fall away and create something completely different. It's not hierarchical. It's not linear. It's something very, very different. And yet at the end of the day, in the United States, the pursuit of happiness ranks very high among kind of the entire ethos of why this American project was created. And so it's really right in line with that, and that these old stories of, we have to really work hard, apply to a certain dimensional level, but they do not apply to the levels that we're beginning to play in and remember and embody. And so there's just a lot of letting go of old stories to remember, frankly, some of the most ancient ones. There is a foundation on this platform in the mystical traditions for a lot of this wisdom, and it's kind of coming back to the surface now. We're really not at the apex of human civilization. We may think we are because we have gadgets, but this is the greatest smart device in your possession if we just learn how to work with it, right?
Absolutely. So I want to hear so much more about that, but I wanted to say about the star kids. So my daughter, she's 9, and when she was, when she could barely talk, she was just barely old enough to talk. I remember she saw a picture of a planet and she points to it and she says, that Arya. And I said, the planet? And she said, yeah, that Arya. And I was like, so there's a planet named Arya? She said, yeah, that's where I'm from. And it's funny because the reason I named her Arya is when I was like 14 years old, right after I got my first period, I had a dream where this daughter comes to me and tells me my name is Arya, and you're gonna have me, like, don't freak out, but you're gonna have me at some point, and it's really important that you do. Like, I'm kind of a big deal. And I was like, okay. And so now that she's a little bit older, I ask her about that, and she's like, yeah, I actually remember coming from that life to this one. I know I was supposed to die and I didn't, and I don't know if I'm going to like pay for that at some point. But she actually just took a different kind of transition and chose that on purpose. And she remembers all of this stuff. And it's like, yeah, I have no reason to disbelieve that. Like, she's just telling me this as if it's, oh, and by the way, I had cornflakes for breakfast. It's totally normal to her.
Yeah, just so you know. So absolutely. So this is this big changeover, right? You hear a lot of people talk about a shift in consciousness, and there is this amazing fleet of children like your daughter, like my daughter, like many others, are just wired in a way that they have so much in the way of a greater awareness to gift the world. Again, not by lecturing us, but simply by just being themselves. And I guess that ties really beautifully into the importance and around the message of energetic sovereignty, is that if we don't reclaim that as adults, right, we are not in our authentic self. We are chameleoning into different forms to please different people and to avoid rejection, instead of bringing forth our greatest self and letting that be the same no matter who we are around, no matter what's going on. And this then, what's happening when you do that, you see me keep doing this in my field, right? You get to walk around as if you're in this beautiful light bubble where you just get to feel good about yourself all the time.
Yeah.
All these old intrusions of picking up on mom and dad's stuff, grandma and grandpa's, the ancestral line, what teachers said, is really just a projection of themselves and their own issues. And then as empaths, like you said earlier, we pick it up and think it's ours. It's not. My daughter, when she was 4 or 5, I was putting her to bed. It was the early days of my awakening for me. So I was just kind of coming back into this remembering of, telekinesis, teleportation, telepathy, like all of this ability that seems magical, but is just run of the mill in other civilizations,
Mm-hmm.
other star systems. She started to talk about what I was thinking in my mind, but I had not shared with her out loud. And I realized, okay, we can function at a higher level. So there's the telepathy. Then we forget, we spend so much time in school learning memorization and all of these things and functioning at this level, becoming dependent on external devices. I've been talking a lot in my groups about this, that the elements, we can communicate via river systems. We can get information from water in ways that was very commonplace in indigenous communities and ancient communities, and that we've lost. So, this to me, I'm passionate about evolution, but it's really in a lot of ways a restoration
Yeah.
of what was lost.
So, what can the listeners do as individuals to tap into that and not get in their own way of that awakening and that restoration?
Yeah, that's a great question. The hands down, the number one thing that never changes. It's always super critical, no matter where you are in your awareness, and that is psychic hygiene. And what I mean by that is using the breath. I have a free meditation. We can get that out to people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
My YouTube channel, yeah, and it's basically going through each of your energy centers and using the breath to clear them out very systematically. Makes a world of difference, because then you're only working with what's in your field, not with everything else that happened to get in there. Like, it's like a nice deep clean is one way to think of
That
it.
sounds great.
Or whatever works for you. Maybe so you've got something else, like walking in nature, being near water, Epsom salt baths. All of this is really, really good. But the energetic sovereignty is one that you just really can't skip that step, because things get embedded in our chakra system, and you really need to pay careful attention to what's going on. And that's why I say it's ongoing, because you bump into someone, you have a conversation, the news happens to be on, and stuff is flying around. So hands down, that's, absolutely number one. And then, your question about how to not get in your own way, it depends on how much of what I call the skeptic program you're still carrying around. And in some ways, this program is also, it's the conditioning that tells us that we need external information. We can't trust ourselves, right? And so it's flipping that around. And we've all been trained to be so skeptical of things that can't be verifiably seen by physical instrumentation, meaning these eyes. But we have a pineal gland. We have this amazing inner eye that has the same kinds of rods and cones and receptors that these physical eyes do. They're just processing information from different dimensional sources. So if you understand that, you can take what you're experiencing and what you're sensing much more seriously and not discount it as, a figment of your imagination, or you're making stuff up. That's the one I hear all the time, right? I think, what if I'm just making all of this up, and trusting that. But it comes down to clearing out your field and shifting your coordinates, and then you can tell when someone is lying. You can get it. There's just, because it's all right there.
Yeah.
Right. Ultimately, I think we're all headed there. And what a relief that people won't have to walk around carrying a lot of what they think are secrets. It's just going to be there for everyone to be able to work with and help each other. But for right now, people still are working with a lot of those encumbrances. So psychic hygiene, psychic hygiene, psychic hygiene.
And how has that changed you, being more aware of your psychic hygiene?
Massively. So I used to walk around in the world, like we were talking about earlier, picking up on energies and just feeling awful, often in my solar plexus, right? In the tummy, just feeling kind of sick and nauseous, thinking like, ooh, I must be nervous, or, I couldn't make heads or tails of why I was feeling that. So just a general well-being of, no matter where I go, I can prevent it even from getting in my field, first of all, right? But by setting up the light construct that transmutes it as it comes in. But even if something does kind of come in, having the tools to be able to work with that and get it out of my field, transmute it with love. And so there's just this this continuity instead of the ups and the downs and the ups and the downs, right? That roller coaster that most empaths, open-hearted people feel, it starts to even out, and you get to live in the 0 point. It's very quiet here. It's beautiful in that you don't have to think about anything, and you're manifesting or emanating your reality from such a different plane of consciousness. So it's a lot quieter, it's a lot calmer. I will say it's kind of interesting because if we're addicted to a lot of drama, it's not that. So you have to kind of get used to, it's just very quiet here. And then ultimately, I guess I haven't touched on, there are amazing metaphysical abilities that come with this. So the ability to heal things, from simple things like ear infections and, I'm thinking about like tennis elbow in one of my friends, to much bigger things. And I don't really talk about that too much publicly because I don't want to be the healer for everyone. I want everyone to unlock that ability in themselves.
Right.
But we really can live at this next level where we don't have to be relying on external substances to heal ourselves. We really can use energy medicine. And I've experienced some amazing healings.
Can you give us an example?
The one I just love telling this story. There is an aspect of my multidimensional field who is in human form, and he's kind of like an ascetic hermit somewhere in like the Pakistan area, the Himalayas, kind of that area. And he contacted me several years ago when I began doing this healing work. I became aware of him, maybe is the better way to put this, right? Like there are all these different tools that open up when you start to connect to your multidimensional self that come in, kind of, it's like shaman work, right? The shaman works with different guides and helpers on behalf of the person. And so this gentleman's name is Gujit Ran, and he showed me his little life history. He had a spontaneous awakening, and he's just been existing in a basically pure state of bliss ever since. And I had a person I was working with, their daughter had been to, I think it was Sweden, got mold in her lungs and was working with a homeopath to try to clear it out. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, let's see what Gujit Ran says. And he said, yes, no problem. We'll put a resonant layer in her auric field. We'll invite the mold into it. And then he pulled the whole thing out of her crown chakra. And I went, okay. Told the mom, they went back to the homeopath that week. Homeopath tested for mold, 0. She said, what did you do? Some energy work, right? So are these results, are they replicable and verifiable and all of that in the way that we're used to doing things in clinical trials here? No, but we don't really need those steps, right? When we can just open up our own field and begin to say, I need help healing something with myself or my child or whatever, and you'll be amazed at what different parts of your field can come in, because we're this amazing multidimensional field with many different fractals. We're not just, our consciousness is not just here. That's why I'm curious about your daughter. I think she's just operating kind of simultaneously, right? We could be there and we're here at the same time. So, this is where it gets interesting, right? That, yeah, we maintain this physical body here, but we can tap into all sorts of abilities and kind of awareness in our other aspects in other star systems who are more evolved.
Absolutely. So
it's like the ultimate app.
Yeah. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, it just occurred to me, right, that we get excited. Actually, I was told not to have a smartphone a year ago, so I let go of that. I just function. I just get my information differently. But with your smartphone, you get excited when you get a new app. Like, and now I can access this and I can do that. So it really is your multidimensional self. Activating that is really the ultimate app for the smart device that is your human form. So that's like the real fun and like advanced level of all of this. And it begins with this basic, hey, wait a minute, I don't even have energetic sovereignty here. I've got energetic cords from my grandmother, from my brother, from, the shopkeeper who yelled at me last week. That's the beginning of all of this, is keeping that all clear.
It's wonderful. So I usually at about this time do a little exercise. And what I'd love to do with you is to have you, so I'll have you close your eyes if you don't mind. And I'm going to kind of wave my magic wand here. And everything is now as it should be. And everyone around you now has beautiful psychic hygiene. They are awake, they are aware. And this society has just completely transformed into a much more high vibration society. And I want you to just describe for me what you see, hear, smell, taste, and touch in this new space.
Yeah, it's so clear. So many people are not wearing shoes. They are walking barefoot on the ground. There is this beautiful connection with our planetary consciousness of Gaia. Their needs are being met through their feet, actually. There's nurturing that's coming up through from the energy systems in the earth. I was seeing animals, and the ability to communicate with animals is seamless. There is a calm, steady kind of movement. Everyone is in, there's no hurrying anywhere, and there's no worrying. Everyone is simply in a state of equanimity and exploration. It's just very calm and centered and joyful, but not like on the high of the roller coaster joyful, just really calm and steady. And there's really nothing that comes up that can't be dealt with. There's no chaos, there's coherence.
Hmm. So I want you in this space to go to one of your favorite places. Just get into your happy place, wherever that is. And I want you to just describe it for me.
Yeah, it's this beautiful, intricate tree house.
Mm.
Again, the consciousness of the tree is participating in the energetic of this place. There are young people here. I would say adolescents who are coming and going, and they are creating and they are expressing. They are sharing. It just feels like a high vibrational incubator in the form of what we would consider a tree house, but with kind of many different levels to it. And the tree is just enormous, absolutely enormous.
That sounds amazing. What does it smell like here?
I'm getting the scent of a little bit of vanilla, a
Mm.
little bit of that old musty kind of wood bark smell,
Hmm.
kind of the two combined. Yeah.
What do you hear?
I hear murmurings of young people talking and laughing.
Beautiful. And what do you feel in this space?
I feel a deep sense of relief.
Yeah. So I want you to look back to what had to happen for this to become real. What were the obstacles, the specific obstacles that needed to be overcome for this moment to be possible?
Yeah, there was like a whole setting down of weapons,
Mm.
which included words.
Oof. Ah. Yeah.
There's a great settling back in to one's individual set of wounds, and a massive support to help them do that rather than this being projected out. The war, waging war with words is what got set down.
I love that. Thank you. You can open your eyes.
I'm like, I'll just hang out
Yeah,
here
I'll just say
forever.
here. Thanks. I'm good. I love that exercise. And what's so interesting about it to me is how when people go into that place, it's always so clear and so specific for them. And it's like I can see it too. Sometimes I'll close my eyes. I was closing my eyes with you and just kind of seeing like that tree house and really experiencing that. Like I could feel the wood, the feeling of that smooth wood. I love that so much. Ah.
Thank you. for that. This is what we're capable of doing, is creating these inner touchstones instead of external touchstones, right? We have these inner touchstones that then start to reshape reality from the inside out.
Absolutely. Do you have any other tools or touchstones that you use?
I'm trying to reach the whole breadth of the spectrum of what this journey involves. So I don't think I've mentioned mindfulness. Just the mindfulness practice is so helpful, just to begin to be able to witness yourself as an external observer. I think that hand in hand with learning how to clear your energy centers, really important step, so that you can always be witnessing, I just got triggered about something, I just projected something. Might not be able to prevent it yet, but you're at least beginning to witness what's going on. So those are kind of like the bedrock foundation of all the other stuff that I will say just starts to take on a life of its own, right? It's almost like you get some sort of energy accelerator, and there are exponential effects that start to occur once we start to break out of these really dense states. So breathing, lots of hydration is really important. And then time outside in an environment, a natural environment that is intact, because its coherence will help transfer coherence into your field. This is why many people feel better after a walk in the woods or by
Mhm.
the ocean, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely have to take a walk in nature every day or I just get off. Yeah. And
The
I love
butterfly.
so there's different mindfulness practices. And one thing I remember when someone first brought up the idea of mindfulness to me, they described it as, well, you're just sitting and like observing your thoughts going by. And I found that really frustrating because I just had so many of them. It was like as soon as I'd notice one, like five more were coming. And so what I found really helpful as a story person, because I'm a storyteller, what I found really helpful was to start to narrate myself to myself
Oh, yes, in the third person.
in the third person. And so I would sometimes write it down in a journal, but a lot of the time I would just be sort of like talking to myself or going through this in my mind about, describing me as I'm going through my day or whatever it is that I'm doing as this other entity, this other person. And what I found really empowering about that is, first of all, it helped me see my stories as just stories. These are just things that are happening, and I don't have to take them on as my identity or as, who I am. It's just this is a story that happened to this person. The other thing was that then I felt more in control because I'm the narrator now. I'm the writer. I'm the author. And so I could say something and then it would happen that like, oh, but now she's starting to feel a little bit better. She's got a little bit of a smile going on there. You see that? And then it would actually occur. So if you have a hard time getting into traditional mindfulness practice, that's something I can recommend to you. As obviously you're listening to my podcast, so you're probably a story related, a narrative thinking person. So maybe try that. It worked really well for me.
That's beautiful, because then you can edit, redact, and change your personal history, which is a huge part of this as well, right?
Yes, I always tell people, you think you can't change the past, and that's not actually strictly speaking true. You actually have full control over the past. And in fact, by changing the past, you can change the present and the future at the same time. And
Beautiful.
yeah, so one of the things I love to do is when people have, a big, powerful sort of trauma story that has been sort of a defining story in their life, is to go back and reinsert themselves as an adult into their, sort of childhood trauma story and change the ending. And I say, well, you can't change the ending because, that's how it happened. Well, are you sure? I mean, memory is kind of, so we don't really know exactly what happened. And
Yeah,
so you
that's
can change
beautiful.
the ending. Yeah,
Changing timelines, and then the effect on the physical body and what you hold at the cellular level changes,
absolutely.
and you get to jump a timeline, basically.
Exactly. Exactly. So, what would you say is the biggest takeaway or the main message for the listeners today?
So I'll check in with their collective field.
Absolutely.
So this is really interesting. There's a really big emphasis on being able to uproot yourself. So what I'm getting is that a lot of people feel stuck or like they can't make change. And it is entirely within your prerogative to uproot what you thought you needed to be involved in, a part of, and then to be able then to plant roots much more soundly and firmly in soil that actually supports you.
That's beautiful. I love that so much. Yes, 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 yes.
It's a transplant. That's what we're talking about.
Yes. You have
Because
the
many
power.
of us weren't, necessarily born into ideal energetic environmental conditions. Maybe good enough for the status quo, but for where you really deserve and your soul knows it wants to go, just don't ever be afraid to make change.
Yeah. And I think you're right. A lot of people, what they do is they kind of try to branch out. They reach their branches out to like, oh, I need to be over here or I need to be over there or I want to, be more like these people or I want to, hang out more with these people. But what you can do is actually pull up your roots and get out of that barren soil and go over to where the soil is rich and has what you need.
Absolutely. What a beautiful metaphor, because um, the roots can go so much deeper after you transplant them. That's what I can feel is like the depth of experience that most people are yearning for, whether it's in a marriage where one of the partners isn't willing to be more intimate and do their personal growth work, or it's just the community that you happen to live in or the region of the world that you're in just doesn't feel like it's the right energetic fit. You can't grow your roots deeper there for those energetic reasons. So it's okay to transplant them.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here. This has been absolutely wonderful. Can you please tell the folks at home where they can find your website, your meditations, all that wonderfulness you talked about?
You bet. And thank you so much for having me.
Of course.
What a delight to create in real time with you. So you can find out more at multidimensionalu, the letter U.com, and the meditation, everything is there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Adrienne.